B! What? Mr. Man! What? 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 Alright everyone, hello, and welcome back to a little bit of a discussion on Christian witchcraft. And namely, today we're talking about a little bit of how you can make your own spells instead of having to rely on spell books. This is something that came up with someone I was talking to recently, and it's a great question, which is, how do I make my own spells? Because a lot of times when we look at witchcraft books, which is topical for our conversation, if you're also checking out this week's, discussion of kitchen cookbooks and witchy cookbooks, but a lot of times spell books will tell you how to do a spell that they created, the authors created, and they won't really give you any tips on how to make a spell yourself. Ironically, those spell books are often called cookbooks by magical practitioners too, because the actual understanding of the spell isn't really there. A lot of these books aren't explaining step by step why we're using this item or that item, why we're using this color over that color. And while they do try to explain some of it in the beginning, even then, I feel like a lot of people, if they're ordering a spell book, they're trying to flip to the spells and maybe not super looking into that application. However, I'll tell you all a secret. I don't write down any of my spells. I don't do that. I don't bother because I don't go on pre-written spells. If a spell worked really well for me, I keep in mind what materials I used, not the actual spell itself. Because at any point, a spell can radically change depending on what I've got going on that day, what my energy levels are, what my patience level is, the whole thing. So when it comes to writing spells, let me tell you a few tips about how I go creating all of the spells that have worked really, really well for me. Why are you stuck again? What? He thinks this is like his area now and he will not be told otherwise. He's like, how dare you be this close to my territory? But this is my chair, so no. Anyway, the first thing that I usually use when I'm going to make a spell is naturally, and of course, the Bible. There are a lot of really great verses that are awesome, and I do mean awesome, for getting done things that you want to do. And now this, ironically, came into my possession while I was teaching in the fall semester. Every now and then you get weird people that just get on campus and start stopping the students and handing out those little tiny Gideon Bibles. So this is just the New Testament, but also Psalms and Proverbs. And I had just been thinking to myself how much I wanted one of these, because I knew that these would be awesome to just tuck in your purse or anywhere you needed to go, and if you had to whip out a cantrip real quick, do some kind of spell, bang, you've got an entire spell book basically in the palm of your hands. So one thing that I try to do with my spells, and especially when I say I use the Bible, is I'm trying to pick a theme for the spell. Now, not always is there a Bible verse involved, but for the really big rituals, the ones that I'm super serious about, I definitely go into, especially Psalms, and find one that matches my intention, right? So we all know Psalm 109 is the quintessential return to sender baneful spell. We also know that there are other ones that are really good for chain breaking, or for luck, or for joy, or for all these other things, because Psalms are songs, right? They're poems, basically. Likewise, anything from the New Testament, is in the Gospels especially, are what most folk magic will be based off of, because much of folk magic was using a lot of narrative spells. They were telling stories about things that Jesus or Mary or the apostles did, and kind of creating this sympathetic tie in that whatever the result was here, so too will the result be in my magic when I do this, right? So if Jesus cursed the fig tree and it withered, so do I curse my enemies and they will wither. That kind of thing. So right off the bat, get yourself something tiny you can easily hide, you can easily carry around, or something that's just like not crazy bulky, because if you're doing spell work, chances are you have stuff out on the table already, and you could toss your whole Bible out, but that's a lot of space. And so if you need something from the Gospels or Psalms or Proverbs, find one of the weird people on a college campus and act super excited when they hand one of these to you. Another thing I use in my spells is the rule of threes. And maybe this is because I am someone who struggles with OCD, but I really like doing things in threes. So nonetheless, you don't have to pick 3, but a lot of magical traditions, you might notice, choose intervals of 3. 3 is 6, 9, 12. These numbers show up a lot. Another number that especially shows up in the Bible is the number 7. So I like to pick my ingredients for the spell in 3s, or at least in odd numbers, like 7, like 5. There's something about that where you can kind of have one central item and then equal amounts on each side that makes it easier to organize a grid or organize, some kind of pattern that can point to an energy center. I also think it's just more manageable that way, because reasonably, if you wanted to do something like a money spell, there are tons and tons and tons of things that have to do with money. You could literally use just about every spice in your kitchen cabinet for a money spell if you really wanted to, but doesn't necessarily mean you have to, doesn't necessarily mean you should. So to keep it simple for me, I really like to pick about 3 herbs, 3 stones, something like that, to center my intention on. If I'm doing money, I'll pick onion, garlic, and basil, for example, but I could also choose onion, cinnamon, and bay leaves. I could use all of them all at the same time. Hell, I could make it a 5 herb thing if I wanted to. But what's most important is that I have a small amount of centered items, that I'm not taking everything out and then having to put everything back. And also that I know exactly what I want from those 3 herbs. I'm not looking for the onion's baneful use right there, I'm looking for its money attracting use. Same thing goes with stones. If I'm doing a money spell, I'm going to pick my green stones. But not all green stones, because not all of them have to do really with money. Bloodstone, for instance, is green, but doesn't really have anything to do with money. If anything, I'm going for my moss agate and my malachite. And of course, I'm also keeping in mind the color of the things I use. My money bowl right now sits in a green bowl because green is the color of wealth and growth. I'm going to put a green candle on the table if I have one, because green is again the color of wealth and growth. Just like with your herbs, you want to know exactly what stones you're using and why you're using them. Because, and here's the big part, the tools you use in your magic are not necessarily lending the power themselves. You are putting your power into the spell. So when you are creating the spell, you should be choosing ingredients that help you focus on your intention, not ingredients that you think are going to lend the bulk of the power to the spell. All of these tools, what they really are like pin cushions that pin down your intention and hold it securely in place. Yes, they give a little bit of energy, they give a little bit of assistance, just like, say, it would be if you had a friend help you with something that you were trying to do, but they are not themselves the source of the power, the intention, or any of it. It's you who's guiding the whole flow of energy, and it's your energy that opens up the channel to God, to let God really flood that true power down. That is the bulk of Christian spellcasting, which means you don't need a single tool at all. Prayer is enough. A recitation of a psalm is enough to be an insane spell. But if you wanted to craft a spell that had certain items, certain other qualities to it, this is what you start with. And then after that, what I do is I decide the format. Am I cooking with these ingredients? Am I making a syrup and having these stones sit around it to infuse it? Or am I making a ritual setup in which I have the candle out, in which I have all of these stones around? You could do it both ways. It depends on what you're trying to do. If you're trying to distribute the effects of a spell out to many people, you might consider making it a kitchen ritual. And so the way I've done that before, right, is I've written a psalm out on paper and put it under my cutting board and set up my crystal grid and my relevant spices around a green candle if I'm doing something for wealth. then I also use those herbs and spices in the thing I'm cooking. So when I give it to people after with all that intention and all that energy raised in that room, it affects everyone who eats it, not just me. If it's a more ritual spell and it's something targeted at one person or one goal specifically, that is where I might clean off the coffee table and get that grid set up there with my herbs and my spices in a bowl. And now to activate it, you might need something a little bit different. Maybe you're making a jar full of water that you kind of shake up and throw away. Maybe you are using fire to activate it, right? Burning a bay leaf and throwing it in the pile of herbs to kind of smolder a bit. You have to think about what water would do and what fire would do in that respective spell, what energy those elements are bringing to the table. And when you can decide all that and think of all that, you don't need spell books ever again. Just like with cooking, if you know the basic steps and the basic order of operations here, you can make pretty much anything even if you don't have a recipe. In fact, I feel like cooking without a recipe and just going for it and having something good come out at the end is one of the symbols of someone who knows how to cook, because that means they understand the processes, the techniques, the ideas behind the recipe more than they just read a recipe and follow it. Same thing goes with spells. Do you understand the techniques? Do you understand the why as much as the how? Do you understand where everything has its place in your ritual? Because if so, you can just make up anything on the spot and go for it, and it'll be great. When you cast a spell, or when you try to create one, don't think of it in terms of, I need X and I need Y specifically. Think about what your intention is, and think about what you know will help you manifest that intention, what you know represents that intention to you. With a money spell, you don't have to just use those few herbs I listed or those colors. You could also grab a tarot deck and pull out the Ace of Coins. You could also, if you think of money when you think of, say, a dandelion, because it's so bright and abundant, throw a dandelion on the table. Anything you want and anything you need that will help you center your mind on that intention and guide that energy into its more structured, purposeful form, take it. Use it. Do it. This is why at the end of the day, all of that tomfoolery, goofing on haha giggle about lemon hexes, yes, there are ingredients that might help with the baneful attitude more, but that doesn't mean lemon hexes don't work, because if you know what you want that lemon to do, to sting and cleanse and cut through the bullshit, they work. So just to recap, right? To build a spell means you need to know your intention. Who is going to be affected by this? Is it someone you're trying to hex? Is it someone you're trying to uplift? That'll change the nature of the spell. Is it something that is edible? Because that goes together. This means you can either cook something or not. Know what herbs or stones or colors are associated with that intention. And take note of how you want to end that ritual. Are you throwing something away? Are people eating? Is it something that sits like a money bowl? Is it something that sits like a sachet? Or is it something that is meant to be hidden and tucked away and forgotten? Knowing all these things means you don't have to write down your spells anymore. Every single one can be unique, original, and something that you can't really easily replicate and that other people can't easily see or undo. And that is why application is the most important of skills when it comes to creative things like really any craft, like art, like writing, like witchcraft, any of it, any craft will be only better if you have the knowledge of application rather than just memorizing ideas and memorizing what goes where. So I hope that is a helpful discussion. If you guys have questions, comments, let me know down below, and I'll see you next time for some more Christian witch discussions. See ya!